welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from my side. I'm glad to be here. Today I speak about smartphone-based mobility monitoring COVID-19 in Switzerland. It's actually quite a big study we ran for 1.5 years in Switzerland, and I will explain you the details about methodology and so on. But just to start, I will give you a short introduction, showing you a few images from Switzerland, from Zurich, like empty train station, empty streets, closed restaurants. I guess all of you know all similar pictures of your countries or similar views. This pandemic had a big effect on mobility. People stayed at home. There was, in some countries, a ban. There were measures. There were lockdowns. So mobility was something which was strongly affected by this pandemic. To give you a few facts about Switzerland, on the 25th of February 2020, we had the first corona case. And then on 16th March, there was the lockdown announced by the Federal Council. Recreational facilities were closed, shops were closed, restaurants were closed at this time, only supermarkets were open. So there was a big impact then. And people were also asked to stay at home. There was a recommendation, please stay at home. But there was not an exit ban like in other countries. So there was just a recommendation. This happened, and in the same week, the statistical office of the Canton Zurich came to us and asked, we would like to have current data about mobility in Switzerland, like what could you do for us? And so we started this mobility monitoring. I will explain later on what's that about. But just what I do now, I speak first about the methodology and then about the study design, show you some results, go to a conclusion, and then also to an outlook. Exactly, methodology. As it was in the title, it's a smartphone-based monitor. We get the data over a smartphone, and for that reason we created an app which collects geographic information about the whereabouts of people. And the app, it tracks continuously the whereabouts of these people. We use for that the GPS. We use also triangulation of mobile network and Wi-Fi network systems. The app works in the background. The app doesn't have to be open, so it's a nearly complete measurement of movement of a person using this app. So the app doesn't have to be open, it can be closed, it's all background processes. What else is to say? It's a nearly complete and gapless measurement. Nearly because if the smartphone is switched off, we don't measure. If the smartphone has no battery left, so the battery is empty, we cannot measure. That's the two reasons. Or the smartphone is, they don't take the smartphone with them, then we don't measure. What's important, this is designed as a long-time study. So the app must offer a very good user experience. So it must be easy to install, but it also the battery consumption cannot be too high because otherwise people would maybe get angry and delete the app. So that's one very important thing about the app. Over the app, we can also invite to short surveys by push message on the device. So if somebody maybe is in a shop and exits the shop, we can send them surveys. But for this project, we didn't use any surveys, so I don't mention that anymore. Okay, first we have this app, but we also need people who install the app on their smartphones and who share the data with us. And therefore, we run a panel in Switzerland, which is called Footprints Panel. It has 3,000 participants which share their daily data with us. People leaving the panel, we recruit new, so the panel is always stable on 3,000 people. But over time, it's not always the same as we get new people if somebody leaves. What's quite important, we wanted to run this panel in a representative structure of the Swiss population, and so we built 120 quota cells, or like age, gender, region where they live, and we quoted the panel in this structure, and we run this panel also in this structure. That's as close to representative structure as it's possible. What's else to say? We pay them, that they share the data with us. We give them a monthly incentive so that they're willing to share their data for a long time with us. And there are actually still people sharing since 3 years their data. So that's the background. We also run the study in it. For all these people, we have extensive background variables about like socio-demographics, interest, consumer behavior information. We can connect with the data and get deeper insights out of it. So we take measured data and such basic information to get together. I would like to show you like how detailed we measure. And it's data from me a day when I went to work. I live actually in this small town that's called Hettlingen. It's a really small village in Switzerland, which is close to Zurich. I actually have it here. Then you see the path away with a car to the workplace. That's there. And this way, we have the information then. It's 34 kilometers. It started at this time. It ended at this time. It was by car. And because I went to my workplace, we know that because of the structure of the data, because it's recurring path, we know the purpose of this mobility was work. So we combine this information. You see a different way when I went home, because in the evening there was a traffic jam, and that's why I took the longer way over the highway to go home. Just to move a little bit in, you see again the workplace, and on this violet path you see the way how I came, so it's really detailed with every street. We used therefore a map matching to get all these corners right about the way somebody takes. And there was a small footpath. This was actually at lunchtime when I went to get something to eat for lunch. You also have it with corners and so with map matching, very detailed. Okay, I come to the study. Yeah, I just wanted to give you this background information because it's very important, why we could run this study also very quickly. It was initiated by the Statistical Office of the Canton Zurich. Later on, the Federal Office for Statistics it also came on this project. The Swiss National COVID-19 Task Force and the Swiss Economic Institute, which is related to ETH Zurich. They actually founded this project. A methodology was smartphone-based. I just explained before, the data source was the footprints panel. It was representative for the 15 to 79-year-old people living in Switzerland who own a smartphone. The study time was 1.5 years, so from 1st January 2020 to 4th July 2021. And on the analysis we run always daily. And first we've chosen a base, which was between 2,500 to 2,800 people, a little bit lower than the people we have in the panel. The reason is that we excluded the people who were abroad in holiday, for example, or people who didn't share their data already with us, because we had a lag and we wanted to be very fast to report the current mobility situation. Okay, we weighted also on a daily basis the data set, and what's quite important or what was also important for our clients was that it's an open data project, that our results were reported were public available. So there was a report everybody could download, but also there were aggregated data files they could download and do further analysis with deeper data than we reported there. During the main phase, we updated the data daily. Later on, it was weekly. Okay, I would like to show you some results of the study. And when we think about mobility, like how can we show mobility? And one way is to do that in a map, in a heat map, for example, where a red color shows spots where people moved quite a lot around. We did that for a typical day before the crisis started. And you see a lot of these red spots, they are actually where the cities are, like Zurich, Geneva, Basel, Bern, and so on. Yeah, so that's actually a normal day before the crisis. Then the lockdown came, really different picture, these red spots disappear. So it already gives an impression, okay, there have been less people out of their home. It was also a recommendation, so you see, okay, something happened, but it's still not quantified. It's just a visualization of mobility. And in the study, the main focus was average daily distances. We calculated, and at the end it looked like this. That's a curve. You see the average daily distance in kilometer and how per day. And if its values are 7-day average, otherwise it would always jump on weekends because weekends are, or at least on some days, there is less mobility. So you see the lockdown started, the mobility in Switzerland dropped quite a lot, like it was cut more than half just in this week or in these first days. It recovered then, also number of COVID cases decreased at this time, so it came up in summer, but there was a second wave, a third wave. Measures were tightening at actually different time. I think, yeah, it was actually quite complex, like what happened afterwards. But let's look at the lockdown time. This big effect is clearly visible. So, as mentioned before, we can look in detail in different groups. For example, we can compare young people with old people. We did that, and we show that here. And we see actually 3 lines quite parallel. Older people are less, they have less average kilometer per day than older people, than younger people. But what is maybe most important, in the beginning, there was this recommendation, please stay at home, but it was already clear that young people are not, or that older people are more at risk because of COVID, and younger actually, maybe they are not that much at risk. So it was not clear if young people stay also at home and limit actually their private life at this time. There was one question the task force had, or the authorities had at this time, and they wanted to check, is it enough just to do a recommendation, or do we need to do more? Do we have to really set a hard ban? But with this data we could show also young people stayed at home. There was a good effect. This data was then also very much in the press, so it was shown to the population. It's the new standard to stay at home, also for young people. Everybody helps with it, and so it was quite nice anecdote in this study. Another focus was not only to look at different groups, then also to look at different transport usage. And maybe in the car, you are not exposed to other people, so it's not very dangerous to be in a car. Maybe it's dangerous to be in a train at this time. So this was quite important. And you see here the differentiation, kilometer compared cars and motorcycle with public transport and on foot. And we showed the relative development to a period before the crisis came. The period was January and February, so that's the 0 level. And then you see when the lockdown came, the public transportation went down by more than 80%, very fast. And even the further development or the current situation, public transportation is still on a very low level. It didn't recover fast, while like car usage or so is already on the same level. There are some difficulties with it. Seasonalities in summer, cars are more used than usually. But I don't want to speak about that now. Okay. Other view of point was to look at the purpose of travel. Same here. Shopping. Mobility related with shopping went down after the lockdown, also leisure and work. Shopping most on the first lockdown, but it was quite clear because many shops were closed. But when we see like the situation today, the dark blue line is the lowest, so and that's work. So, and that shows actually that still many people are in home office. It shows the current situation, or at least if they are full in home office, or at least a few days. It changed as well. The companies are more flexible nowadays than 1.5 years or 2 years ago. So we see this changement. One very specific analysis is a little bit different. We analyzed the share of commuters per day, and that's now daily values, which always go up and down. Down values are always weekends. When it's up, it's weekdays. So on an average day, half of Swiss employees travel to their workplace. It's actually work and education. And we also see the effect when the lockdown came, it was cut half, share of commuters. It came up a little bit, but it never reached the level before. And later on, there was a home office obligation, but you see there was not a really big effect of that. And even during the whole time, it increased already. So this gave the task force information that, like how, what happened in the companies, what's happening with the shares, and so on. So it was also quite interesting result. Okay, what was the benefit, or were the benefits of this study? For authorities, it was really to manage the pandemic, to have current data on mobility, on effects of the measures they have taken. I explained you a few before, like this with the young people, with the share of commuters, the effects of the measures there. The data was also used by scientific research, by universities, for example. There were many papers written. There was further studies done. Like one I would like to mention is that there was a correlation between mobility and COVID infections 2 weeks later, and therefore it was used to predict COVID cases in the future. So that was quite. So we gave data which allowed at least some predictions. This was. I like the study very much. It became more difficult when the vaccination started and different protection possibilities. It's a really complex topic, but yeah, that happened. But it was also used by research institution for analyze the impact on economy. When you see, for example, that there is less kilometers drove by car, then also there will be less petrol sell, there will be less tax income because there are high tax on that. So there were studies done like what effect will have this cut in mobility on different aspects of economy. What else were the data used for? The companies used it. One anecdote for that. It was really uncertain times, and billboard companies had the problem. They wanted to sell poster or billboard locations, but they didn't know, will there be a new lockdown? Will mobility go down again? What happens then? And so advertisers were really cautious to invest their money. And so one billboard company came up with a new price, or with a product. That pricing stays, that if mobility goes down with our data measured, the pricing will also be lower. So it's like a warranty that you get what you pay for. And was a product they used this data for. And there was actually a lot of media coverage from the study. There were hundreds of articles and TV news used this data. I just have a few here. It's like population was much less out of home, or even young people stay at home, I told you before. I really like this one. So this applause goes to us all, because the smartphone data shows that mobility is much reduced. So there was also some positive effect while during this lockdown phase. But there also, like, sometimes I was like, what's happening with trains? Like, who now still travels with train? There were so many different things happening there. I come to conclusion and outlook of the study. Conclusion with the technology, or with the methodology, it was possible to show the current development in this area. It showed also very reliable data about what happened during this crisis. We saw also, as a result, like, the mobility changed a lot. Even in the crisis, it went up and down. It was correlated to measures taken, also what's happening with COVID numbers during this time. Really, to mention maybe one of the big things was this drop for public transportation, and they're still on a very low level. That was there's a big impact on mobility, but still happening now. The data brought also benefits to different stakeholders. I just showed you before. I would like to conclude. So, to give you an outlook, we run this panel for more than 3 years now, and for us it's a huge treasure trove. So it's a treasure trove. And we have, like, a lot of this mobility data. It's actually more than 2 million complete measured days we can run now ex post analysis. We can now analyze also what happened 2019, 2020, 21, and this is still ongoing panel. And I just showed you, like, this one mobility study, but we are active in many different areas. Actually, we run really a lot of studies. We create value with this data. Mobility is one thing is which is quite many are interested right now, is like how bicycle usage is developing. That is one point. There is a few studies we do about tourism, and tourism, there is actually a lot of data about like how people sleep in hotels or so, but there's much less data when it comes to daily visitor who maybe just come to an area and hike there, or visitors who don't sleep in a hotel and don't leave their truck. So we can fill up this gap with this type of study. Out-of-home advertising, a really big area for us when it comes about studies about reach. We deliver data, socio-demographic data at which time you reach which target groups better, which is then used for programmatic advertising on digital out-of-home screens. But we do also awareness studies, effectiveness studies within this panel. There's retail as well, combined with surveys like satisfaction studies. Then one I would like to explain, I really like that. I didn't think of it when we started with all of that, but that's the issue CO2 and energy. And right now we run for the Federal Office of Energy a study where it's about the impact on CO2 usage from the individual mobility. And because we know every trip somebody takes, and we know which, if it was by car, if it was by foot, we can calculate what's the average of a kilometer, for example, by car, and then we can calculate for each person how much CO2 they produce with their individual mobility. And so we can do also analyze on that, and we can outline like how this development goes on. And furthermore, we know actually also which car type they drive because of our base data or background data. So if somebody uses a Tesla, it's different than if somebody uses a petrol or like a normal car, maybe. Yeah, and it's also data is also used for urban planning. Last but not least, we offer our measurement technology also internationally. And it's already used, for example, in Germany by the GIM Institute. And they run a panel also similar to Switzerland since 1st of January 2020. And it's runs with, in collaboration with Gapfish. Actually, Gapfish is recruiting them, but GIM is doing the analysis and selling the data. So yeah, so there's maybe, yeah, it's more to come. So that was the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
So that's a sort of great public service as well as kind of interesting to learn. And I loved the sort of predicted the correlation you talked about, where you could start to predict certain trends. Any questions? Yeah? Straight up. That's
yeah,
perfect.
that was fast.
For the moment, I actually have 2 questions.
Okay.
So one is very specific one. So I know that there is a pattern in Switzerland for people on the weekends, for example, go to Germany for the groceries. So is it possible to measure like the share of people, for example, who do this? And the second question is how granular is the data and what is the possibility for the analysis? For example, can we see how people do their groceries? So in which types of stores, for example, they go regularly? Like what's the frequency of going to different types of stores? If they go to a supermarket first and then to a drugstore? So this kind of analysis.
Okay, 2 good questions, thank you. First one, we measure also when you go up road, so we know if somebody goes over the border, and what we do, I didn't tell that before, but for each point we gathering of this person, for each we check with OpenStreetMap data if is there a store where this point is, and if somebody is like 5 minutes at a specific place, we add this information that was it's likely that this person was at this store. So I just jump to the second question, or already you are in it with answering it. We gather every 30 seconds on Android a data point when somebody is on the move. If it's at home, we don't get data points because that's one important thing to save battery usage. But if somebody walks or comes to a place, we get every 30 seconds a point. With iOS, it's a little bit different because the systems works a little bit different. There it is when we have a significant location change, when we have a change in the we use as well the accelerator information of the device, and when there is a change like from walking to sitting, then we get a point, so we know when a new trip starts maybe in a car, and so we try to get then points to know all these ways. When it comes about shops, if it's a big shop like an IKEA and it's geographically clear, then we know exactly this person was in this shop. When it's on a multi-level shopping center, we don't know it. We can guess, we know this person was in this shopping center, but we don't know if it was in Edeka or it was in DM, which was underneath or so. For that reason, with some clients, we work with beacons. Beacons are small Bluetooth sender, and they are mounted maybe on the roof of the shop. And with them, we can also measure very detailed indoor. Actually, we use like 19,000 beacons in Switzerland. And we have like almost all post file in almost all post office we have beacons, like in some supermarket chains. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. I know that we've got somebody waiting online because we're having a virtual presentation in this hybrid format. So thank you very much for sharing.